All right, fellas, I'm here with Lior Weinstein, front row dad, new friend, and we're talking AI today. I want to give a little context here before I set up a very quick intro, and then we'll get right into the conversation, which I'm going to gear towards AI for the holidays as this is dropping. We're going to talk about how we can use some of these new and exciting tools to connect more with your kids and your spouse and make a bigger impact at home. And the context for how Lior and I got connected was, first of all, through Front Row Dads. Want to give a shout out to, I think Brandon Turner is a friend and one of the ways that you found your way in. But, Lior gave I call it a presentation, a workshop. We had a conversation amongst the Front Row Dad staff about how we might be able to use AI. And right when that was over, I was like, we have to get Lior on stage at Front Row Dads Live, which is happening right now as you're listening to this, happening as we release this. But I also wanted to have this conversation because I'm excited to talk about the holidays. I'm in it right now. I'm approaching it quickly, and I want to talk about how we can use these tools. I do think that nothing replaces just being with your family and loving your family from a very heart-centered place. But if I can throw a couple of tools in there, I kind of geek out when it's like I can add some tech, I can add, a new game, a new device, a new something to the mix. I think it adds nicely. So who is Lior? Well, ultimately and foremost, I would say a father, married for 16 years, 2 boys and a girl. And that's most important. But when he's not doing that, he's a tech entrepreneur. Yeah, one half CEO, one half CMO. So a nerd who likes people. I don't know if I quoted you properly on that. That's what I heard. Yeah, something to that effect. Hold on. I lost your audio, by the way.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, it was CTO.
CTO. I'm sorry. CTO. I wrote it down wrong. CTO. That makes a lot more sense, by the way. And a passion for philosophy and human behavior. And what he said in our warm-up was that everything else is just an engineering problem. And I love that. And one of the things I really love about Lior is brevity and focus. And I like when I speak with somebody like that because we just get right to the heart of what it is that we're chatting about. So with that, Lior, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here.
Dude, just so we can give a little bit of a base for the conversation, what's your history into the world of AI? Like, take us through what are the highlights or the chapter headlines of what led us to this conversation today.
Yeah, it's always interesting how the dots connect when you look back, right? The first time I ever saw or was exposed to a neural network, I was about 13, 14. It was a school project. I'm originally from Israel. So I moved to the States about 12 years ago. And in my school in Israel at the time, the Technion, which is like the Israeli MIT, did a project with a bunch of kids, and they came and they taught us this neural network software, how to build neural networks, how to play with them. And I did the whole project for 3 months on dreaming and mimicking bird sounds and bird songs and so on. And that was kind of my first interaction with neural networks in kind of material way. Now, over the years, professionally, I've done a lot in the machine learning space and AI. If it's with computer vision, machine learning stuff, on finance, on really a lot of categories. I got a couple of patents in the space as well, literally structuring unstructured content, which is what a lot of this explosion of interest is around. And when ChatGPT came out last year, for me, it was great. Me and my team have been using GPT power tools for a while before then. Some marketing teams probably for a year, engineering a little bit longer. And it came out, so I was actually in Maui with Brandon when that happened that week, and I started, telling all my entrepreneur friends, "Hey, you got to sign up, you got to see this, you got to play around." And all of them were excited, but also deer in the headlights, like, "What the heck? What do we do with it?" So I kind of took it on a mission to try and explain it to people so they don't overhype, because there's a tendency whenever there's new technology, if it's crypto or now AI, whatever it is, to get very excited and get overwhelmed at the same time and get paralyzed, but also not ignore not ignore the true explosion of value that it comes with. So I decided to do these talks that I give the Front Row Dads team, and I'll cover some of that during the event that hopefully you're listening in these days, about how to think about it. Not like the 50 examples of how it can work, because I look at those as kind of like 50 things you can do with Microsoft Word. Like, it's a tool. I mean, you can do anything you want with it. It's a tool. So I really focus on how does it work, why does it work, what it can generally do, what it can't do, and just empower people around this. And at this point, I did over 30 different workshops, worked with companies as small as 3-4 people and as large as 5,000. Really just focusing on enabling and exciting people around, kind of like an unofficial evangelist, for not just OpenAI, but the category as a whole.
For anybody who's really new to this space, which I think is still probably a lot of people just getting their footing, can you give some broad stroke definitions to machine learning and ChatGPT and AI? Like, what is it actually? When somebody says machine learning, what definition might they have associated with that?
I think, there's, without getting too technical, and I actually don't like calling it AI. There's no real intelligence around it. And I'll explain what I mean in a minute. So machine learning is a way to compute. That's what it is. It's not, it's a style, it's a formula, or it's an approach. Instead of the human learning and creating knowledge and then having insights, you have the machine learning through an algorithm and learning more, creating new knowledge and gaining new insights in an iterative way. And silicone, chips and electricity do that way faster than humans, right? So if you have a good machine learning algorithm, it can learn by itself and improve itself without you as a human need to do more things. What ChatGPT is in a bit of a different category, leveraging those kind of tools and those kind of technologies and methodologies. But ChatGPT is actually based on this concept of artificial neural networks that's been hypothesized, not just hypothesized, been played with and acted upon for 70 years. Like this, there was a theory in the mid 20th century about this. Well, if neurons, when we look down at the microscope, you have this thing called a neuron with a synapse, and the neuron either has a potential. When the potential hit, it fires, and then it connects to another neuron. So there was always this idea, well, what if we create a digital twin of this, right? What if we represent this in bits and bytes, because we already know how to do this. We already know how to do a 1 and a 0 and give electricity to something and remove electricity for something. And for many years, that started to show promise, and those algorithms that I was working on back in the mid 2000s were very effective. Computer vision algorithms are very effective in that context in many ways. And then this innovation that ChatGPT came up with, and ChatGPT is a product. Okay, chat stands for chat, it's a conversation. GPT stands for generative pre-trained. So the G is generative. Generative means it creates, it generates. Pre-trained means this content that it was built upon was scanned. It's an existing piece of content that somebody scanned the words. That's why you can't ask it about your life or your business, because it never scanned your stuff. It was never trained on your things. And the transformer, without being too technical, is a neural network. It's something that transforms. You have an input and you have an output. The math has actually been there for a while now, about 6-7 years. And the big breakthrough that happened is actually a hardware enablement. So it's because NVIDIA figured out how to create a chip that does this fast, then this experience that now everybody's excited to use is relevant. So think about if you went to ChatGPT and you said, create me a 30-day marketing plan for my XYZ business, and I want you to write, all the blog posts at 5,000 words and create the images. And then a day later, you would have gotten an email with, a Google Doc with everything. It would still been pretty impressive, but not nearly as useful as the fact that it can do it in real time. And the real-time aspect is the hardware enablement, which is super exciting. The reason why I don't like to call it AI is because the way these particular technologies work they used to call them large number models. Now everybody calls them large language models, LLMs, because they're very large. It's a lot of information. These neural networks are very, very, very large. All the connections and the interconnections are very complex. But really what it does, it figures out the statistics, the likelihood probability of any word to appear in front of each other. So I'm sure you'll hear me giving this example if you ever heard my workshop, and I kind of say, hey, if I give you the word old and I ask you to guess what's the next best word, and some people say, you know, man or person or house or news and so on. I'm like, great. Usually it's like man or a house. Like, okay, there's 60% in the room is thinking man, so old man. But what if I give you the next word? The next word is McDonald. And now I ask you again, what's the next word? And then 99.9% of the time it's had, right? Because everybody understands, yeah, every time I heard the pair, Old McDonald, I heard the word had. So it must be had. But really, it's a 99.99% must be. Because if I told you, well, Old McDonald was, you'll be like, okay, that's fair. That maybe it's a different sentence. Maybe it's not Old McDonald had a farm. It's a different sentence. So you'll be okay with it. And this concept of choosing the next best word is called temperature in this in this product universe. So the higher the temperature, the more creative it is, the more less likely the word to come. The lower the temperature, the more, the more frequent the word that it's scanned is going to come. So really, if you think about it that way, it's not like it's thinking, right? It's doing the statistical thing. And what's pretty amazing is that it's relevant, meaning that we give it a prompt, it shares a response, and it's showing more about us, about the human experience and kind of our expectations of conversation than intelligence per se. So it cannot create net new knowledge. It's not, it's not built for that and so on. But as a general frame of, the industry and the product and the technology.
It's really helpful. When you talk about how it gathers its content so it can predict, is it constantly scouring the internet? Like, as the internet's updated with blog posts and information each day, is it looping all that in? It scrubs the internet to gather those predictions?
So that depends on the product. So that process we call training, right? That scanning process and saving those relationships. Call training. Some products train all the time. ChatGPT, for example, is a product. By default, they tell you any input or output, so anything you put in and anything it prints out is yours from an ownership perspective, from a terms of service, and this is true to November 2023. But by default, anything you put in and out, it can be used for training. You can opt out of that if you didn't want to. Some products, like what Bing is using, which is an offshoot of the same model, do train on a more regular basis with scanning the internet and putting new content. The big explosion that's really going to happen that we're going to see in the next 2 and 3 years, is just industry specific products. Right? ChatGPT is a generic product. You can use it for anything. You can use it for poem, you can use it for research, you can use it for planning and so on. But really, if you think about it, a lot of the value is going to get unlocked by somebody doing that for the legal industry or for the accounting industry or for engineering or for manufacturing, where they constantly train on new and relevant content from the industry, let's say compliance manuals and so on, and your company, like emails, Slack communication, team communication, and so on. So that's basically the answer is every product has a different training regime. And some of them update every single time. Some of them update through online content, and some of them don't. Some of them, it's a manual, basically upgrade of the training.
You mentioned earlier how to think about it, how to think about the process versus like running through, here's 100 examples that you can copy and paste. Some of the examples are really cool. Like we talked about writing bedtime stories with your kids. And then I was like, oh, that's so cool. I could ask Ocean for like, what was his emotion today? Tell me about an experience he had. And then we weave in, I use it to gather intel on his day, but then we weave it into the story. So he's more likely to give me insights about his day when he knows it's going to affect the story, or it turns it into instead of feeling like an interview, where it's a burden for him to tell me about his day, it's part of the play. Yep. So there's all those really cool examples, but how should a front row dad be thinking about using AI in parenting, in marriage, in his business, or the integration of all those?
So first of all, from a high level, I think the big thing that I tell people is your Google muscles are not very useful for ChatGPT. Like we've been for decades trying to consolidate our thinking and basically use a sniper rifle with Google and kind of say what words and what order I'm going to put in so Google can find the document in their massive archive that I'm looking for. And ChatGPT, you need to use in the exact opposite way. And when I say the exact opposite way, I mean, give it as much information as you possibly can. So the better mental model is a conversation as opposed to like a prompt, which I think that the problem with that word is that it makes you contain it like to a tweet or something in your thinking, that is. And when I say conversation, I mean, let's say you're having a conversation with your kid or with a consultant, whatever it is. You wouldn't just come to your kid and say, tell me 5 things, or write me a story with 5 things about your day, for example, because it would be like, how many decisions do I need to make here? It's too overwhelming. Same thing, you wouldn't go to a consultant and say, give me a 30-day marketing plan. The consultant was probably going to be like, what's your business about? What are you trying to achieve? What are your, what's your target market and so on. So give it a lot of information. And to be honest, with all the voice to text tools in your computer or on your phone, especially in the ChatGPT app specifically, it just ramble. I really recommend to ramble. Now, the way I use it with my kids, one of the esoteric use cases I found out, I was in Maui back in January, and I was sitting with my kid in the evening, and my kid was playing Minecraft on his iPad. And he was asking me, Dad, how do I get to the Woodland Mansion? And I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. And then 30 seconds later, I'm like, let me ask ChatGPT. So we open ChatGPT and I'm like, in Minecraft, how do I get to the Woodland Mansion? And sure enough, open Minecraft, go to the terminal, do / locate space structure space mansion. I'm like, holy heck, it worked. And then we did it. And my kid was like, that was cool. And he was just turning 7. And so that was the first time that I'm like, oh, I have something that's way more real time than I thought it is in terms of how useful it is, the utility. And at the time I was still learning, teaching him and his younger brother how to read. Now they both can do that. And it was a constant struggle trying to figure out how to not just follow a lesson, but make it engaging, right? From my personality perspective, from their personality, and make it relevant. So then we started doing that. One, my kids saw ChatGPT live. So then within that week, every time I didn't know something, he's like, ask ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT. Just like he knows how to do, go to Google, or I look at if it's on Amazon, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And so we started doing bedtime stories. And exactly with your example, we were, on this family vacation in a different place. So we took something we did that day. And my 2 boys, they love Power Rangers and Minecraft and whatnot. So, and I don't want to spend 45 minutes reading a bedtime story. So I go to ChatGPT and I start prompting it about, here's my kids' names. Please write me a funny bedtime story that's about 10 minutes long. So I give it a frame.
Yeah.
I share something that happened during the day and also say, make it a Minecraft theme and add in a fart joke because my kids. And
because of course, yeah.
Of course. And then, it reads a story and then I do it. But then I ask them in the middle of the story, hey, do you want to change anything here? And then my kid is like, yeah, let's add, swords. I'm like, great, Chad, please add, swords to this scene or whatnot. So, and then after a couple of weeks, now they're prompting it. So now part of their daily routine is to write, quote unquote, their own ChatGPT story. And then I read it. Right, now that they know how to read, now they read it, or I read it, or we both do it together, and it's a whole thing. But then we don't just use it for bedtime story. Like we travel a lot. We're a traveling family. We fly, we drive, we do a lot. So we take those events into that as well. Also, as summarizing the day or vacation, because you can go in and I'm not a very good record keeper personally. Meaning I don't personally keep a diary, but I always wanted to be the guy that keeps the diary. But I'm very good with using these kind of tools. So it's easier for me to come in and have my wife ramble on. And this is and I say this in a good way because that's what ChatGPT needs. It needs more information. And I'm like, just tell the story, go, I take ChatGPT and share what happened today or whatever it is, whatever event or whatever full day or whatever full week. And then it helps us consolidate it and write it in the kind of the annals of the family, right? The stories of the family. But really especially in family communication, if it's with kids or with my wife or with other family members, my wife and my mother, right, her mother-in-law, it's a really good assist to figure out how to change your language and say different things. And I learned about that by helping one of the entrepreneurs I was mentoring. She had a bit of a kind of a very direct communication, which I have as well, but she has very direct and kind of unapologetic communication. And she kept getting bad feedback from the team about it, right? From her team. Like every once in a while, somebody was, feeling like she was against them or she was mad at them, and she wasn't. That's just how, she speaks. So I told her, do me a favor, just instead of saying what you want to say, before you say it, go to ChatGPT, say what you want to say, right? But say it, can you revise the language to be a bit softer? I'm trying to say this to this project manager. Or again, it could be your mother-in-law or whatever human it is, and change it. And within like a month or 6 weeks, she started getting feedback about, man, your communication really improved. It's much nicer to work here. And I find that in the conflict resolution department of life, if you're not sure how to share bad news or have a tough conversation or explain difficult concepts to other adults or to kids, ChatGPT is a lifesaver because you can share very, like even now. So this is November 23. I'm Israeli. I'm sure a lot of people heard about what's happening in the Middle East. And for me as a dad to my basically Israeli kids, I'm trying to explain this thing. How do you explain such a complicated conflict? So I went to ChatGPT and I'm like, this is everything I feel and I want to say, but I want to explain it to a kid without scarring, right? How do I have a difficult conversation about this, and how do I, and this is really the impact. So then I have a conversation with ChatGPT that's half kind of like behavior therapy, right? So because I can tell it, act like a therapist, act like a, that specializes in kids communication and so on, and add some Chris Voss concept because I'm trying to negotiate. And, so it helps me, one, clarify my thinking. That's what's nice about writing, right? When you write something, you're really thinking through it. And because it gives you this instant feedback you have a little bit of an ounce of a thought, right? You can articulate maybe a few words or a line or maybe a paragraph of words, but it can complete it for you. And then it completes it and you're like, it's not exactly what I mean, but I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I mean. It's the tip of my tongue kind of effect, right? And it can get it out of you, and it's a private experience because it's you with ChatGPT. It prints it out, and you say, no, this is not good, or this is really good. Can we share a different example? Or can you create an analogy for this for, a 5-year-old? Or do you think there's any downside of me trying to explain this to a 5-year-old? And then it gives an answer. Now, it's very important to know, this is a statistical engine, so there's no like expert behind it and no intelligence behind it. So when you get a response, you need to really use your brain and figure out if you want to use that response. Okay, so it's not the same like talking to an actual expert that distills advice through the lens of decades of experience. This is not it. Okay, in some cases it mimics it, but you don't know. So I always tell the people, it's not, especially if you're getting quote unquote advice from it, you need to make sure you have a way to validate it, or that you approve the message. Basically, you're thinking, but don't treat it as a diagnosis or or a prognosis. So communication improvement across the board. If it's helping myself explain myself to other people, if it's helping me engage, to your point, now it's like a reason to talk to your kid. And now your kid is expecting that. So now as they go through their day, they're thinking, oh yeah, I'm gonna tell my dad about it. Right. Because he's gonna, and that makes him remember, and understand his thinking. Now my kids are really good with ChatGPT. They use it a lot, the kind of expert prompters, which is really, it's funny. It's like saying I feel like this is going to age not too well, because it's kind of saying, expert Googler. Like everybody knows how to Google, but that wasn't the case. Historically, only a few people knew how to be like information specialists and knew how to find stuff in archives. But these products make it so easy. And it's interesting to see what they use it for. Like, for example, we started doing these gigs at the house so they can earn money for things, right? Like, feed the dog, take out the trash, those kind of, that's that age, right? Where they want to start earning money and then spending money on Minecraft. And so now they go to ChatGPT and they're like, give me 120 ideas on how I can make money around the house. I'm like,
Exactly.
Right. So, and they don't have the, ChatGPT said, so it must be true, or it must be, nonsense kind of thing. But it's great. Like, I'm very happy for it, but then it creates its own challenges. With it. But then I can do the other things. I'm like, okay, ChatGPT, what do you think this is worth? Right. And it's really good. Certainly with homework or family planning stuff. A lot of people use it for, like, we're not big cooking family in our house, which I wish I was, but I have friends that are. So they use it a lot for that, like planning dinners, planning recipes with the kids, create the instructions, create funny instructions as a prompt, for the kid, especially if it's thematic, if it has a theme. So create funny instructions how to make an egg for, Moana style. Okay. And then they print it out. And now with DALL-E or Midjourney, all these image generation tools, you can do iconography, you can do full-blown images. So it's cool, right? So if you can really curate a very nice experience for family events or one-on-one. Learning any kind of skill is fantastic. If people here in the homeschool world follow direct instruction, which is a type of methodology, that in essence, every time you teach 10% new things, 90% repeat previous things. So you can use that as a basic concept to teach anything. It doesn't matter if it's math or language or history. And you can create an entire curriculum and lesson plans. Again, I like to contain things. So I always, if I do that, I say something that takes 30 minutes or 20 minutes or 2 hours as opposed to open-ended, because then it's more practical. I feel like it's more practical to do it that way. And I also share, like when I use it, I share it with my wife. I share it with my kids. So they see I use it. I think some people kind of hide it, which I think if you're writing, a birthday card for your wife, that maybe it's okay. Although it's recorded, but, I still love you. Maybe it's okay. But generally, I want them to see the tools, the skill set, how elevating it is and how enhancing it is. And also how it kind of raises the standard. There's a conversation now in academics, for example, in academia, to use ChatGPT or not, which I think it's a nonsensical question to begin with. It's like not use a computer, not use Word. Like what's the concept of not using a tool that can make your life better? Like why would you consider it? But I also say now that it exists, there's a certain bar. For example, now that you have Microsoft Word, if you're submitting a term paper that's not in Times New Roman, perfectly spaced, and with the date and all the bibliography and whatever it is, it's substandard. So now I think when you have that tool, a lot of things in life are going to be substandard if you don't use them to produce something. Like, is there really an excuse not to do certain things if you have tools like this, right? If they enable you to do that. And I use a lot for, I think that the best thing for me is the fact that it gives such a quick feedback on nearly any topic I talk about. Even when my kid is sick, like my wife was really worried about, we have a 3-year-old daughter and she had some kind of a fever pattern that we didn't know after having 2 other kids before her, right? And so she was freaking out. She would go to the emergency, and I don't like going to the emergency room for just like fever. And so I go to ChatGPT and I explain the whole thing. Okay, I have GPT, act like a pediatrician, right? And I fully know it's not a doctor, but I want to see what it gives me. And act like a pediatrician. I have a 3-year-old daughter. We just came back from vacation. This is what's happening. This is the fever. The fever on this night was this. The fever on that was this. This is how she was complaining. It's been 4 nights, blah, 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 blah. Just vomited all the information I could. And it gave me 3 The caveats, the product caveats. I'm not a doctor. You should, go to whatever the OpenAI team did to make sure people don't abuse this. But then I'm like, okay, it gave me the three different things to consider, and one of them was some kind of worm something that I'm like, I didn't really know about, but I Googled it, went to Google, and sure enough, very similar symptoms from a reputable health site, and it was an over-the-counter drug. Went to CVS, bought it. Morning after, she was fine. Like, great. But that's how you use it. It's an assist tool. And the big thing is also alleviating, because it was like 1 a.m. My wife like wanted to take her to the urgent clinic. I'm like, no. This is a bad idea. This like, there's got to be a better way. And just kind of defaulting into this is a tool you can use for many things. And if I just went to Google, which by the way I did later to compare, it was just too much stuff. Right?
That's right.
All these generic articles of like fever in kids. I have no, like, there's no way for me to make reason or rhyme from this. But ChatGPT can distill it for you because you ask it to distill it. You ask it to contain information. You ask it to explain. So really, I use ChatGPT now more than I use Google. Not for Google stuff. For Google stuff, I still go to Google, right? Like I wanted specific information about that condition, or I want to know something that has a hard reference, I go to Google. But for everything else, really, I mostly use ChatGPT. I really love the communication aspect, like changing communication, softening communication, creating conversation prompts, all those. That's probably one of my favorite family style use cases for it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So many ideas are in my head right now about how I can see people using this. And you said this assist tool, which is a brilliant way of looking at it. I think about if you want to say grace at the table, if you want to say a prayer before Thanksgiving dinner, and you know you might be put on the spot and you don't know what to say, maybe you could go speak it out to chat and have something, refined, brought back to you where you could. It's a thinking partner is really what it is. And it's well, to me, I shouldn't say what it is to everybody, but there's a couple of things I want to reflect back of what you just said, which, Lior, everything what you just said was so great to hear and process and consider how we can apply it. But one of the things I've talked about with Front Row Dad through the years, I said, you can go Google how to be a better dad, but you're going to end up with what you just said, which is a ton of articles. You're going to have to filter through a gazillion ads and a bunch of BS to maybe mine the nugget or two, because you're just going to get a vomited amount of feedback to you. Where the reason I like a community of people that I can post to is I'm generally not getting a bunch of BS answers. If somebody doesn't know, they just don't share. So but if somebody does, if they're like, yes, I've been there before. Yes, I have a person for you. I can recommend something to you. Yes, I've read a book on this and it's good. And there's this curated conversation. There's a filtered conversation. And what I love about these prompts is you can ask it to deliver something to you in a way that's palatable for you too. So you can say, deliver it in bullet points, put it in a graph, make it like you can get the feedback in the format that you like it, in the style that you like it. If you want it to be funny, you can ask for that. If you want it, right, in the voice of a certain, in a certain voice, you can ask for that. All those things are this iterative process where I don't love looking at a blank page. I don't love opening up a journal and going, I got to start from scratch. I love talking things out with people. And this becomes my digital thinking partner where at least I can get out what I know, the questions, where I'm wrestling, what I want. And then it gives me something to look at. And I'm much better when I edit something that exists. Like you said, you can take it and ask, like, does that make sense? And that to me is a beautiful part of like, you bring your sovereignty, your autonomy to the conversation, your knowing of who you are, what you want for your family. And you use what you receive back, whatever content you're asking for. And then you just put your hand on your heart, or you think with your head, use your whole body, whatever senses and resources you have to say, is that me? Does that feel right? Is that good? Or like, that's a beautiful way to get to the point of where you feel more complete, like you can move forward. So, and you also said this thoughtful part of it, like it just gives you a chance to pause for a minute So if you do ask chat for help, maybe that pause in and of itself is a beautiful part of your process. It's perspectives, right?
It's perspective. It's like you said, it's cutting to the chase. Like the fact that you don't have that start friction that a lot of people have, that everybody has with their thinking and certainly what they're doing. And that's why in my talks I share, nobody, and I learned this from a dear friend, Dean Jackson, everybody has a writer's block. Nobody has a talker's block.
Right. Right.
And it's just way easier to talk. But people are not used to talking with a computer. They're not used to talking with Word. They're not used to talking with Google. But I think ChatGPT is going to change that paradigm, because more words make it better. And talking is easy. You just need to now learn this behavior of talking instead of writing, because if you write, you're going to have a writer's block. But talking, you're not going to have a talker's block, especially if you know that it can accept junk. When I open a ChatGPT conversation on my phone, like I do these walks every day, and sometimes it's like in a 1 hour brainstorming buddy or an actual writing buddy. And I'm like, I'm trying to do this thing. I'm working on this new project, and here's what I'm thinking. With all the ums and all those bad forms of language that don't go into writing, that you spend a lot of brain cycles editing out of writing. And you don't have to do that when you talk, especially with tools that the more words you give them, the better they are. And it's very forgiving. And then it gives you a perfect answer, right? Meaning it doesn't give you an answer with the ums and something you need to listen for 5 minutes just to get 1 minute worth of information. It actually gives you a concise one, especially if, to your earlier point, you give it context. Like the more you tell it what you're trying to do and who you are, the better the response is going to get. The reason why communities are so effective, because we have a shared context of something, if it's dad or entrepreneurs or whatever it is. And you understand the question and the questioner, like who's asking the question. So when somebody is choosing to give you a response, it's filtered through all of that context into, a bullseye, hopefully a bullseye response of what they need. And you can have that with a ChatGPT type tool if you give it more context. If you everything, you give all the caveats and all the the precursors to the conversation.
Because I'm always interested in, like, what's the thread amongst the collective? Like, what's the pattern? If I'm becoming a pattern recognition expert, can I take, all the dad wisdom and find the thread? That's what it's essentially doing, right? Because of its trying to predict. It's saying, can I source all this and give you the common thread?
Yeah,
which is sometimes more of what I want when it's almost a common sense answer. Is what it is. It takes all the radical stuff and all the and maybe it just sort of smooths it out and says,
well,
hey,
you can tell it to be radical. You can tell it to be creative. But that's kind of the point. You can tell it, depending on the conversation and your style, it can mimic whatever you need. That's why when my kids use it, I remind them, tell them that you're a 7-year-old prompting it. So the responses are going to be digestible for a 7-year-old. So even if we use the same words for the prompt, because they give it the former context of a 7-year-old using you, then the communication is different. But on the opposite side, you can say, I'm, a 60-year-old dual PhD in physics and mathematics, and I like very long, complex answers.
Right.
Then it's going to do that because it's a great reasoning machine. It's not a great machine.
It's great. Lior, I know we're out of time. Thank you, man. I appreciate this. As this is airing, you're probably on stage in front of our Front Row Dad audience, taking questions, sharing wisdom. Like, I'm excited about that. I'm really grateful to be able to hang with you in person with these guys. It's going to be a great event. Can you end today by just sharing, look, you have success, you have friends. Why did you say yes to Front Row Dads? Maybe that helps somebody else who's on the fence or thinking about whether or not it's the right community. And of course, it's not the right community for everybody, but why did you say yes?
I think being a dad is not something you are, it's something you do. And as my kids grow, I do it differently. So me being a dad in the first, 1 year, 2 years of my first kid's life is a very different experience than the second kid, very different experience than a girl. and very different experience now that they're, you know, older, past the age of reason, and life is different, and everything is different. The floor is lava, right? Not just the kids are changing, not just physically and mentally, like the dynamics change. I said, you know, when my second son was born, people asked me how different it is, and I'm like, there's another programmer in the house. It's not just my wife and I. Now my firstborn is also parenting my kid, and it's a constant learning. It's a constant challenge. There's no done. There's no I know what to do. So when I first heard about front row dads, I'm like, oh, it's the dog whistle, right? Of these guys are trying to figure it out. Active pursuit of figuring it out, not reading a book and now I quote unquote figured it out. Now I have the knowledge. Like, it's recognizing it's a process, and it's a lifelong process, because I'll still be a dad when I'm 90, right? I'll still be a dad. It's just going to be different. And then hopefully maybe be a granddad, right? Or a great granddad, and so on. But it's a thing I need to continuously do. And I feel like the community shares that value, each with their own struggles and backgrounds, which, exactly to your point, from the average of everything, we can distill the truth in the middle, because everybody contributes just a little bit into it.
Yeah. Well said. Lior, thank you, sir. Appreciate you. Like I said, man, at the very beginning, it's been great getting to know you. Not only the intelligent part of Lior, the thinking part, but also the heart of Lior. And I can feel that comes through in the way that you converse. And you're here showing up for these conversations because you don't just want to do it well for you, in your family, in your home, behind all those beautiful closed doors, but you want to share it with the world. You want to have this conversation with a larger audience. So thank you for that too. See you in a couple of weeks, man. Thanks for your time. I know you're off to another call. If people wanted to connect with you, can you just real quick, where might they find you?
Easiest on LinkedIn, because I don't really do, like, you know, Facebook and the like. Shoot me a message. If you're a part of the FRD community, just find me on our Telegram groups. And if you send me a message on LinkedIn, you know, I'll give you my email, my phone, and everything.
Awesome. Thanks, Lior. Appreciate you, brother. Talk soon.